Welcome to the podcast. Hi, Stephen. Hi, Winston. How are you
Hey,
guys
Vince.
doing?
Fine.
Yeah, it's a nice Monday. How are you, Vince?
Doing well, doing well. Um, so let's just kind of get right into it. We are starting this podcast and a little bit who we are. We all work for Marketing Evolution. And what we want to do here is talk about marketing and how it's relevant to companies and businesses and how it's relevant to you and your business and your sizes. We're going to talk about topics that demystify marketing claims and give value to you guys, the listeners. And that's our aim and our goal here. So we're going to have various topics that come about, and we could definitely use feedback from you listeners. Like leave comments if there's something you guys want us to address and talk to, and we will. We'll get to that. So with that, we're going to get right to the first question that we're going to address today. And Stephen, I want to start with you. This question is, what is marketing attribution? How would a person go about believing that their marketing is working? And, maybe more importantly, how do they think about explaining it to others? Because it is a big topic, and I think that's a big task asking that, but I think it's a good place to start. What do you think marketing, what is your experience, your path with marketing attribution, and how does someone go about thinking about it?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I should have a really great canned answer for that since I've been working in that space for I think it's 8 years now, but I don't have a canned answer. So as I think about marketing attribution, I mean, it gets back to at the end of the day, what any marketer is trying to accomplish. And it's important to recognize that a marketer isn't just an advertiser. That's different. It's a marketer, someone taking something to market. They're trying to sell a product, a service, something, right? They have some end result they're trying to accomplish. And a way that they frequently do that is they do invest in advertising in order to amplify their message, in order to generate awareness of their brand or their product. But where it's always been hard and continues to be difficult is to understand how a dollar invested in sorry, distraction there for a second. How a dollar invested in some advertising channel pays off down the road and some in whatever end result they're looking for. I think in most cases that probably is some type of a transaction from some end customer. That's not always the case. You've got nonprofits that are trying to get people to do things. But anyway, long story short, what marketing attribution does is it reveals, in an ideal state, it would reveal the impact of marketing on some behavior or attitudinal belief or something that occurs downstream. And there are a lot of technical solutions that have been developed over the years to do that, that I'm sure we'll get into later. But yeah, that's my long-winded, circuitous answer.
You might kind of go into that bit though, like, what have you observed in attempts to address what is attribution? What does it look like? Just kind of a brief
Sure.
history of what you have seen, observed in your career.
Well, I think historically, up until really, probably less than 5 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago, attribution was something that was always done in I'm going to call it like a human-driven pseudo black box, where there would be, either a marketer would have a team of analysts, or I hate using the phrase data scientist because it's just a very vague term that means a lot of different things, but that's a lot of times what people may be called, or data scientists, or they would hire a firm that has that would essentially take in all the data they get their hands on, and try to build some kind of a model using their understanding of statistics in order to try to recover some explanation of reality. And then with that model, they would usually build a PowerPoint presentation that highlights some takeaways from said model, and they would show that to people making marketing decisions and say, our model says you should do this, not that. I think that's kind of been the historic case. Now, what those underlying models are, those differ. They're different approaches to get there, but I think that's what the use case used to look like a lot, was this it was white glove delivered presentation packages to a decision maker of some type. I think that's changed some. There were companies that came along, and it has been longer than 3 years, because I definitely know of a company that had an automated product before then. And there are other companies that have come along now, and now it's becoming much more popular for there to be some type of pseudo autonomous measurement system that has a dashboard that a customer can go in, and there are widgets they can play with. They can move sliders around. They can figure things out. And there's a lot of different offerings out there now that are providing various different flavors of, I'm going to call it media measurement, because I don't think they're all really attribution, but measuring the impact of media downstream.
Thank you. Now, Winston, if I could, kind of pull you in, like, thoughts on marketing attribution, kind of, and then kind of the same thing, like your own path and what you observed, and kind of give us that experience, that look.
So if we start at what is a marketer charged with, it's basically you have a set of tools and you define the best way to use those tools, meaning in economic terms, what's the best next dollar to invest in, and then also finding new tools, so new avenues for investment. And so it's kind of strange that if given that is the reason of being for a marketer, that something like attribution would come up as the solution for trying to achieve those goals, because attribution doesn't really do that the way it's been presented in the past. You could argue that attribution as a product space has been around for 10 to 15 years, or maybe you could say that it's really just an extension of the longer marketing mix modeling domain that's been around for 40. But these are at best giving you an idea of how you did in the past, and not really giving you anything to work on in a first order economic kind of sense to tell you how to spend your next dollar the best. And the reason they're not doing that is because it really takes some sort of decision support application that utilizes the calculus of microeconomics to tell you how to spend the dollars the best. And just using historical reporting out of marketing mix or attribution with maybe some statistics about how efficient on average a media is, or average effectiveness. These things are just statistics. They don't really tell you anything about what the next best choice is for your dollar investment. People confuse this idea. They think that that's telling them what they're supposed to spend in next, but it's really not. The most efficient media is not necessarily the best investment on the margin.
So, hey, Winston, so I think that was an outstanding explanation of the limitations of something like attribution. And like, would you liken it to, I mean, I'm going to assume that most people have at some point invested in a single stock in the stock market. They bought a share of Apple at some point or something like that. Would it be the same as my wife and I are sitting around the kitchen table and we found an extra, someone got $1,000 bonus or whatever, and we're going to put that in the stock market, and we can just open up the newspaper and look at I don't know if they still have stock sections of the newspaper, but they used to, and I'd look at them when I was a kid, I understand what the hell they were. Or we go to, some other, I think every search engine has a stock ticker and allows historical reporting. So attribution would be akin to us looking at hey, this is how this stock did over the last several years, and we're going to compare a whole bunch of them, and using that to make a decision, which, people do. And it's like, and in a lot of cases, they're not wrong to do that, right? I mean, Apple's a good example of one that their historic performance is probably fairly predictive of their future performance. Maybe not, but it isn't really. The reality is that I'm at a point in time just looking backwards at something, and I'm not really necessarily putting my dollar in the next best place, because I don't have anything that's allowing me to really project that forward. Is that what you're saying?
Right. So the thing that's pretty clear about securities investments is that there are risk profiles that vary by the different types of investment. And so when you sit down with your portfolio advisor, they talk to you about your personal risk profile. If you're young, maybe you have a greater appetite for risk. As you get older, you tend to think that you become more risk averse. And so you develop your portfolio based on what your personal risk profile is, for your given point in life. And so you put together a basket of investments similar to the basket of media investments that a marketer makes. And you do so with some understanding of the risk and return of each of those investments. What your portfolio manager does is they figure out the total risk and return conditional on all of the investment vehicles. And that's what you're looking for in a decision support application, is something that can appreciate the whole basket of investments that you're in and how the dynamics of each of those risk and returns will work together, so that you're not just making some, boneheaded move like picking the Reddit Wall Street bros advice on the next thing to invest in, and unwittingly just tossing that into your portfolio without understanding what the full dynamic of your risk potential is.
You're saying I should get out of GameStop then? Is that correct?
I don't know. It might be too late. I'm not sure. I haven't been following it.
Take a look. I have to look into that later. Okay. So then I think that, so if I think about it, my mother-in-law has a financial advisor who's someone who makes a lot of money off of her little bit of money. And essentially attribution is something that would maybe help us independently look at the effectiveness of that financial advisor over time in the past or whatever, maybe, but it's not it isn't something that helps us figure out what to do next. That requires someone actually, doing more with that.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it is basically akin to having your personal investment portfolio quarterly summary, come in the email inbox to you and telling you what your average rate of return was over that period. Now, conditions are going to change tomorrow. They could change in the marketplace. They could change for you personally. New opportunities could come up. And so just basing your next move on what you did yesterday is not going to be the right thing to do every time.
Can I ask you guys, because attribution and kind of going through the outcomes of how to go about utilizing that knowledge, because I feel like that knowledge is there, but how best to go about and act upon it. Like, in your experience, have you seen, was it that a company, it's just like, if we could imagine, say, like a company that's a bit of a startup, maybe a mid-sized company, and they're making these decisions on marketing and how they would go about choosing the next best dollar, thinking about portfolio. We could talk about other different sizes if it is relevant, but maybe a good place to start, and what do you guys think, and maybe your experiences anecdotally of how you observe that.
Well, I mean, the thing for any firm to think about is who their shareholders are and what they're doing to maximize value for those shareholders, because that's ultimately why we have jobs. And so if you're a medium-sized firm, You may not be publicly traded. You might be privately held by, could be by a larger corporation, or it could be held by principals, maybe VCs or something like that. So then you have to think, what is the risk profile of the shareholders, and what are we doing to be able to maximize the return for them? Now, in a firm that's a medium size, and maybe they've been around for a little while in a product market space that is not quite mature yet, there's a lot of growth opportunity there. And so you can typically find yourself taking a little bit bigger bites to make a mark in the market, in the marketplace. Is this
bigger bites? Can you expand? Like, what do you mean by that? Like, I guess if we could, kind of drill down to it a bit more.
Yeah, so you can get more aggressive with testing into new investment positions. I mean, that's ultimately what you want to do, right? You're a firm, you're selling something, you've got a marketing program in place. So based on the current mix, you have some next best move to make with those dollars, but you can also test into new positions. And that's what we want to think about as investment professionals, is testing into positions, because there's no clear market price for these marketing investments that we're making. The only way to figure out the right price is to test in and observe what sort of returns you get. And by testing, we mean like small, steal a phrase from personal finance, dollar cost averaging into something. But you need a good decision support application that you can constrain in such a way to say, okay, I'm going to freeze I'm going to hold steady on all of my investments as they are currently, but I'm going to test this new hypothesis that I have on this one particular piece of media, and I want to understand what an expected return is for that. And so you keep doing that. As a medium, growth oriented kind of firm, you can afford to take bigger, make bigger steps into your testing, because, well, for one thing, you're not having to deal with the political problems that exist in much larger corporations that have maybe publicly traded shareholders and board of directors that expect a particular earnings per share to come in every month or every quarter.
I feel like I go down a bunch of different paths with that. But Stephen, before I do that, or is there any thoughts on your experience on how a medium-sized company would kind of like utilize this knowledge of marketing attribution? Because even then, just to say marketing attribution is it's a really important term, yet like the application of it and how they want to think about it, and we kind of hear about how to test, but then like specifically what you would want to do with that.
So for me, I mean, I kind of go to the internal politics of a company, and Winston alluded to some of that with larger corporations. They're going to move slower. There's going to be more risk if you're a publicly traded company. There's certain things you just can't do without creating a whole major issue for yourself. And I think one thing, like at a medium-sized company, I'm picturing like a pretty small leadership team where there's some head of marketing, whether they're called a CMO or a VP or whatever, who is probably hands-on doing a lot of the actual decision making, and they probably find themselves frequently in conflict with whoever the head of finance is. I mean, that's something that that's a well-known dynamic that the marketing and finance are in conflict for dollars. Finance tends to be in conflict with everybody for dollars because their job is to try to conserve cash as much as possible. Usually, not always, but a lot of times it is. And at a medium-sized company, I'm envisioning, a startup company that's either bootstrapped or backed by angels or ventures, and has a limited runway and is trying to get as far as they can with whatever they have. And I think that's another place where attribution kind of comes into play, is that not beyond the ability to test into these new investments, it does also offer the ability to quantify the ROI, the return on the other investments, to show that marketing is in fact working, and be able to demonstrate something that in a defensible way that is not always that demonstrable, I guess. So I mean, I know that's kind of a tangent going in a different direction, but that's something that I do think is important in a lot of places, and that's the place where that backwards look does become valuable. Is, in the boardroom, for example, when the leadership team is giving a presentation, the head of marketing is able to say, we invested X dollars in, and this is what we believe we got back out, and here's how we got that number.
So that I think that's what's really interesting, what we got out, and just like talking about that. And I think there's a lot of solutions out there, and we've probably all experienced various solutions. And how would someone go about trusting, like believing in what's coming out, because I think people have maybe different perspectives. Marketing's been out for a while. How would they go about trusting it, or some experiences you have felt where like maybe it's something that looks right, is accurate, but is not taken, also maybe not accepted. And like how would you guys go about kind of building that trust, or kind of like sharing that knowledge so that others can accept it?
The best way to trust something is to use it.
Agreed.
And then hopefully with something like this, you make money using it. But I think a lot of folks in the industry get caught up with developing trust in these sorts of solutions based on how it paints the picture of your sunk cost decisions, which is not the right way to do this. But it's probably the predominant way that it's done. Does the vendor...
Can you say that again, like in another way, Winston? Because I feel like that's an important point.
Yeah. So,
or Stephen,
it's basically, is the vendor making my baby look pretty? Right. I'm coming into this as I partner up with this attribution vendor. I've already made a bunch of decisions that are in place in the market. I thought that they were the best decisions I thought I could make at the time, else I would have made some other decisions. So too many people are going to get caught up with how good the vendor describes how my previous actions have helped the company. And that's a flaw in this industry. It's a flaw in human nature, but a lot of it's driven by people who don't really know any better, because they never got trained in the right way to think about how to evaluate these types of products, or even think about how to make the right next decision, or what it takes, what sort of metrics you need as a decision maker to evaluate whether you're improving. And that's really what it comes down to is, okay, the CMO can walk into the boardroom and say, I got, 10% return on my investment last quarter. And by all accounting, that might be a good return, right? I mean, it's probably exceeds most companies' internal rate of return, and it probably exceeds what an investment manager is going to make for you in the stock market for a quarter. But But what does that represent in terms of the opportunity that you had to take money out of the marketplace that would otherwise go to your competitors or just to nothing? And that's really the right way to think about how well you're doing, is how much opportunity you continue to take out of the marketplace month over month, year, quarter over quarter. But unfortunately, everybody thinks about this in terms of, well, does the contribution of to sales that this vendor says my media has, is that congruent with what my expectations are and what my manager's expectations are, what expectations we have communicated previously to executive stakeholders? That's the trap that people fall into almost all the time.
So with that, just switching up a little bit, Steve, oh, sorry, did you have something? Did you want to go?
Oh, I was going to say something. Yeah. I mean, I think that, like, to Winston's point, I mean, this is something that I think that everyone in our space has probably seen, I don't know, countless number of times. And, you know, it's like the idea, like, data-driven decision-making is this, you know, it's a very popular phrase that has been around for, I don't know, at least a decade, 15, 20 years. I don't know. I feel like I've been hearing it forever. But unfortunately, I do think that people find themselves, and I think it's through no fault of their own, frequently in a situation where, you know, they feel that their job hinges on the ability of them to make decisions in a vacuum and those decisions be 100% correct. For whatever reason, they believe that to be the case. And so they no longer are looking for data to help improve their decision, because odds are these marketers actually made okay decisions to start with. They didn't make the worst decision possible. They didn't make the optimal. They also did not make the, what's the opposite of optimal? Like worst? We'll go with worst. There's a fancier word, I'm sure, but I'm going to go with worst. They did not make the worst decision possible either. They're in the middle somewhere, and that's where data can help drive making a better decision as you continue to iterate and get stronger and stronger. And that's, but they find themselves in this place where instead of looking for data-driven decision-making tools, they look for, like, you know, basically tools to confirm their preconceived notion, like bias confirmation tools, basically, is what they tend to want at the end of the day, because that's what they think they need, is to get a checkbox on you know, on the test that they took, and they didn't even, like, they didn't have a calculator to help them on the test. You know, they're doing long division, and I don't know, there's an analogy there that I'm not going to try to spin out, but there's something there. But I don't know, rambling at this point. But
to make it real though, can when you guys like share like an actual story with no names, obviously, but like, you know, just an experience where like, you know, say that a person maybe was
a general, I got a general example that this applies everywhere, and I've talked about this with other people, and there's nothing against, well, I'll just share it. So somewhere that I think we see friction, like, almost every time someone sees results, and I think this is true for any kind of multi-touch solution or marketing mix solution, is the paid search team. The paid search team, if they exist in a company, they tend to look at what's called last touch attribution, where that assigns all credit for some, be it a web visit or a sale, to whatever the last thing the person saw, clicked, did was. Which, you know, I don't know about you guys, but like, when I go to ESPN.com, I don't type in http:// I don't do that. I just type in ESPN into my search bar, which automatically searches for ESPN. I'm then served a paid ESPN search ad at the top, probably, which I may or may not click on, depending on whether I want to charge that company money for me to come visit them or not. And then I go to ESPN. But I didn't go to ESPN in any way because of that. However, that's a place where we frequently see friction, where you know, the preconceived notion of how strong that media is driving sales, it's hard to overcome, because that team, and they have these metrics that they're pulling. Historically, I don't think that that's actually, Google, I think, has deprecated that measurement now, but previously they were pulling that out and they're saying, look, we're driving 95% of web traffic, you know, or whatever it might be. I mean, that's a general example that I think is experienced everywhere, and leads to internal strife in most marketing teams.
And it shouldn't come as a surprise that last click attribution awards paid search so much, because paid search is the thing that awards Google.
Right.
it's the single best thing that that company does. And so they're bound, it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy that that your performance is going to look good through the lens of last touch, last click.
Yeah.
So if I could pose like another scenario to you guys, like, you know, we know that these marketing teams are under pressure to deliver, to perform, and they have to manage vendors and agencies, creatives. There's a lot going on, and there's pressure to deliver. What type of advice, or how should they go about thinking about their marketing, their approach, to kind of not necessarily like squash the pressure or their concerns, but to help address, say, that concern, but also deliver the best value? Like, how would they go about approaching it? Say if you have good examples with certain customers or clients, because we know that they have, like, they're getting paid to do this, they're getting paid to deliver, and they may be the person making all the decisions, or they may be person who's trying to support the person making all the decisions. So how do they go about trying to, end the day, work with their company to deliver? Because with attribution, you kind of have an understanding how marketing works. How would they kind of then deal with those dynamics?
So, I mean, I'm going to answer from one point of view, which is my background is primarily in the management of technical teams, product engineering teams, right? And the reality is that no software developer is perfect, no employee is perfect, but bugs happen, right? People introduce bugs in the code. There's all kinds. I'm not gonna get all the things that someone could do wrong as a developer. There's a lot of them, right? At the end of the day, as a manager, I don't expect someone's first stab at something to be right all the time, or their quick stab. Like, sometimes they're under the gun, they're under pressure. I recognize that they're not going to deliver as strong of a solution, product, whatever they're doing, if they're constrained either by some resource constraint. And everyone has resource constraints, but if I'm constraining time and I'm also not providing them other resources, then I don't expect a lot out of them, sure. But what I do expect is that they continue to improve and they continue to grow and they continue to get better at what they're doing. So that's where something like attribution steps in. And I think that hopefully in a lot of companies, there's enough psychological safety for people to use tools like that and to say, hey, I think I did an okay job here, but it's going to be even better next time because I've been able to look back and see some places I made mistakes. I figured out some new paths I'm going to take. To Winston's earlier point, hey, I'm going to run this experiment. We're going to try going into this new media that's like something like TikTok that like came out of nowhere a few years ago and took over all of the teenagers' phones in the entire United States and the world in general, and like, I'm going to invest there maybe. I'm going to do an experiment and see how it works and go for it. I mean, I think that there's some of that, right? Where like accepting the fact that you're never right, like no one is ever 100% right, but it also doesn't mean you're wrong. And you can iterate and you can get better at whatever you're trying to do. I mean, and that's true in like everything, sports, music, film, like, I don't know, everywhere. Like, that is true. Like, I don't know. I learned as a kid, nobody is perfect, and practice makes perfect is a ridiculous statement, but practice does make better, and iterating makes better, and taking in data that's sitting in front of your face and using it to learn will make you better, even if you disagree with it. Like, even if you look at it and you say this is flat out wrong, it still can help drive a decision. So I don't know. That would be my answer.
And I think Stephen, what Stephen's describing is are the characteristics of growth-oriented individuals who are also in growth-oriented firms. And like, one of the maybe not too surprising things about a lot of larger firms is that the personnel inside those firms, they get wrapped up in growth up the corporate ladder and achieving that by basically demonstrating a risk averse type of personal business policy. What I mean is, like, more specifically, is that Somebody comes into a position, they're shown that, okay, this position, it must fulfill these particular tasks. Here's what the report looks like. Here's what it looked like last time. If the result doesn't look pretty similar to what it was last time, there's going to be a lot of questions coming from the upper level of management. And then you're going to have to be able to explain that. Now, maybe you can't explain that, but what if the previous reporting was cooked up in some, Enron accounting shop where they're just cooking the books? Well, you're going to be kind of in trouble if you come up and show them that, well, actually everything that they thought they knew in the past was fallacious, and now we have real measurement that can help us with growth oriented policies, but the firm really isn't about necessarily growth oriented policy. It's more about maintaining particular earnings per share guidance, and at the end of the day, that's the marketer is going to succumb to that kind of political bureaucratic pressure that exists inside of a lot of large organizations.
I think unfortunately you're very right about that, and there's yeah, that's very unfortunate, but people need to put food on the table, and they learn what they have to do that, right?
Yep.
Just put some media numbers out there, like just for your example, which is like, say, like last quarter you spent $10 million on search, not to pick on search, but they saw that drove X number of sales. Next quarter comes around, spend the same amount of money, but it went down. And then that's an example where you're talking about.
Yeah. And so what's the story? I mean, did it go down because the whole marketplace shrink and there's just less opportunity to be had? Or did it go down because, well, we really realized that like we had all this other media running that we weren't thinking properly about, and it turns out that stuff was working for us and search was just getting the credit? Well, that's a tough pill for people to swallow, particularly because in these marketing organizations, careers are in place based on teams working on particular media categories or channels, and somebody's the manager of the search team, or somebody's the manager of social or digital or offline or whatever. And as you said, Stephen, they're trying to put food on the table. And for a vendor to come in and say that maybe there needs to be a reallocation, that's a tough thing for these people to hear, knowing that it's their livelihood at stake. So there's there's a conflict between, growing the business at a top level versus maintaining personal career stability.
Yep.
That's a powerful statement. Sorry,
yeah.
Sorry, Stephen. Go ahead.
No, I mean, you took words out of my mouth. That is a very powerful statement, and I think it is very accurate.
What's interesting? We talk a lot about numbers here, but I feel like at a certain point you got to talk about people and navigating that. Like how, for a marketer, right? That I think we kind of been talking a lot towards a larger marketer, like a larger budget. And when I say larger budget, probably like millions of dollars. We're talking a lot to that group.
I think probably the group that spends like north of 50 million a year.
And if you could, kind of like, wave your special magical wand, and you don't have to worry about calling babies ugly, because I feel like that's what has to happen sometimes. But how would you think about like a large organization handling marketing decisions in a better way?
I think so much of it starts with the way that the marketing department is organized. Got to stop thinking about these media channels as siloed opportunities for investment. If you invest in one, it has an effect on how the others are going to perform. So decisions about these investments need to be made in a cohesive, centralized way, so that everybody's bought into everybody's success, and it's not pitting one channel's performance team versus another. The search team can help out the social team or the television team, just as much as they can help themselves.
Steven, same type of question for you.
No, I mean, I think Winston hit the nail on the head there. I mean, I think that it's, and look, I mean, not all large firms are created equal. Like, not all of them behave the same way. I mean, I've seen some very large companies that have an environment where they are able to have those conversations, and they are able to recognize that the collective success is the goal here, right? It's not, did the search team overperform? That means that money gets clawed away from the social team's budget or whatever. Like that, that exists. There are plenty of companies that absolutely operate that way, and that's where I've seen success, both in them growing honestly better employees, and them moving people up the ladder, and home growing some real talent, and not having terrible attrition of great talent. And also marketing success. I mean, Winston's right. These things, there is a ton of interplay. If there wasn't, then no one would ever buy something like marketing mix modeling, which is all about how the mix works together to produce a result, right? We all know that these things play together and that they influence each other. So, I mean, I think there's that. And then, the other thing too that I see, and this is not specific to marketing or in big organizations, but having alignment towards common and shared goals. I mean, I think that, if you think about it, in a marketing organization, you've got like the paid search team, which, at the end of the day, there are probably two really important things that they actually do. One is some SEO stuff, right? They're making sure that when you search for Coca-Cola, for example, Pepsi doesn't pop up first, right? And the other thing is, and in doing that, they're basically protecting their brand, right? They are doing that. And then, you can, depending on where you are in your life cycle as a company, paid search can also help you do the opposite to someone else, right? It can help you jump in and take away. Like, if someone is searching for Pepsi, Coca-Cola might come up first, and they click Coca-Cola. I don't think people buy that online, but you get the idea. I mean, so I think that, it's doing that while something like, out of home may be really driving just brand awareness or something, because people aren't driving on the road and they see a sign and actually immediately take an action, right? You can't. You're in your car, you're driving. You can't, unless it's pull off this exit and use the cleanest bathrooms on I-75, there's not much you can do. So I guess at the end of the day, it's understanding the strengths and weaknesses of different channels, and understanding what each, what the goals could be for each of those channels, but more importantly, how they come together to one unified goal of what we're really trying to do as an organization. And I think that a lot of times that gets lost, where every team's being measured on different metrics, and they're being measured on different outcomes, and that doesn't, while they produce some different outcomes, they can be unified. I think. I don't know. I may have talked about that last statement. I'm not sure.
Organizations and the people in those organizations need to be realistic about what marketing's potential and what its role is for the firm, given where the firm is in its life cycle and where the product space is in its maturity. If you are operating in a very mature market, where people really understand the products well, and you are a well-known brand, there may not be a lot of opportunity in the short run for marketing to get big ROIs. But that doesn't mean that you don't continue to invest in it, because part of what you've been successful at is building up this goodwill in your brand that means a lot. And what it means is that there's a long run inertia that's going on that brings people to buy your products or services without a lot of incremental effect in the short run from media or marketing. But there's still a big effect of marketing on the long run. And so, if you can think critically about where you are with respect to the maturity of your product space in your own firm, then you have a better expectation about what the short run opportunities are for ROI for marketing. That's a different thing than the long run ROI, which is harder to measure, needs more data.
Like, if I could put another scenario out there for you guys, someone gets their attribution results back, or they get an understanding of how it performed, and it's not as high as they would like. And they have to deliver that message to either their boss or stakeholders. How would you kind of arm them or give them, without seeing the data, so this could be a tall ask, but how would you what would you try to tell them or share with them or give them the information so that they can share that information and not feel like they're going to get their heads bit off because it's not the best news?
Well, I mean, if you totally depends on the manager, right? Or just the leadership. And not everybody has good leadership. If you don't, you probably need to find another job. Because a good leader shouldn't be biting your head off if you walk in with some attribution number that says, oh, things are down a bit. All performance should be evaluated on how much you are growing, even if that growth comes through a cycle of failures, like Stephen was talking about earlier. That's the way to understand that's the way to measure performance growth. So I would hope that most managers or leaders are able to understand that, but I'm probably not. So if it's just, I'm walking into my boss's office and it looks like average ROI is down year over year or quarter over quarter or whatever, there's got to be some story for it. Either we didn't know what we were doing in the past and we did all of that math wrong, or the market conditions have changed for today. But let's think about what we thought as an organization those market conditions were going to be at this point. And that's not the individual employee's responsibility to understand the market expectations. That's the firm's responsibility. At the firm level, everybody needs to be bought in about what they expect the market to look like at some point in the future. And so when you get to that point and your average performance is down relative to previous periods, you got to understand, is it down because we as a firm missed where we were going? We didn't understand what the right opportunity was for us in the future periods.
Yeah, I think Winston's once again right, nail on the head there. When I think about as a manager, someone's coming to me with, let's call it unexpected news. Sure, maybe it's bad news, but coming to me with something I didn't want to hear, I didn't expect to hear it, right? I mean, what I'm gonna want from them is I'm going to need to. I likely do not understand at all where these numbers are coming from. I likely don't understand much about it. I just see this statistic and it's the ROI or whatever it might be. And so what I'm going to want to hear from that person is I am going to want to hear some story, something that helps me understand why this looks different. Maybe it could be as simple as we changed vendors, and so the measurement is slightly different because we're using a different methodology, which I mean, Winston kind of alluded to. Maybe we were doing our math wrong, or we're just doing it differently. You know, there are different accounting schemes, right? There are different ways to do things. And also a plan to understand it further, a plan to take action off of learnings from this, or as well as, an understanding of how I, as a manager, can then communicate that to my boss or my boss's boss as it goes up the chain, and if that needs to be done, and how to better set expectations. Because a lot of times things like this happen because expectations were set very poorly. I think back to what Winston was talking about a little bit ago, and we were talking about, people in these different firms or whatever. I think that there's got to be, you need to be self-aware about the limitations of what it is you're doing and what you can do. What opportunities really exist in the market. And then you need to set expectations as realistically as possible about what your outcomes can be. And I mean, I've heard people say some pretty ridiculous things. I've set crazy expectations for things like direct mail campaigns, which, I'm sorry, in 2023, I don't read a single piece of mail that comes into my mailbox. Like, I don't even read bills anymore because I get them all digitally. If someone's still mailing me a bill, they're likely not going to get paid because I just don't read my mail. And I don't think I'm the only person that doesn't read my mail. And I sure don't, look at marketing communications that come into my mailbox. Now, maybe that's like just a middle-aged male thing, but I don't think so. I guess that gets back to that self-awareness and setting expectations thing. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, ideally a manager is not going to rip your head off, but they are going to want to hear a little bit more about what's going on and be able to understand it. And they're going to want you to have a plan to move forward too. That's just a general rule of employment is don't go to your manager with a problem and expect a solution necessarily. Walk in with a problem and a proposed path to a solution at the very least. Because managers tend to have 8 to 12 people that are walking in their virtual office door on a daily basis with problems. So that's another just piece of personal and career advice there for you.
I feel like there's a lot of places where we could take this, but one thing that you're touched upon seems like there's solutions. In your guys' experience, you've seen multiple solutions. And I would think that not all of them are created equal. You touched upon last touch attribution. What do you guys think about the marketplace where we are right now with what is available? And why is it maybe hard to digest for some of these folks to say, like, yeah, you're telling me marketing's this, but can I trust that? Like, how do you even measure that? And I think, how do you guys, how would you guys like think about, we could say that, disclaimer to the listeners, we all work for the same company, Marketing Attribution. We have solutions. We have seen multiple solutions out there, but I think it's still worthwhile to just kind of talk about what we also have observed, because we also have seen, we compete for different contracts. You see different solutions and you go to conferences, but just your thoughts on the solutions that are out there and how to comprehend them.
It goes back to the types of the profile of the people and the firms that are going to use these solutions. Marketing data is bad data. Even when there was an abundance of user level data, it was never very good. And it was limited in its scope, right? So there's less of that now. But the marketing portfolios have grown both in terms of volume of dollars spent and numbers of media channels used, which complicates the situation because, again, the data is bad. So there's limited opportunities to be able to use this stuff in a fast sort of growth oriented way. The classic MMM shops have tried to speed up the game because they recognize that they have to compete a lot on being able to service growth oriented people, as well as the like retrospective reporting types of folks who just need something once a quarter. But the main thing I think for evaluating these, any sort of product in this space is, if I want my organization to be able to grow, I need something that I can use and iterate on and fail fast with. And, failing fast and being able to grow with something probably means that you need to sacrifice a lot of the overly exhaustive, like academic, entertaining forms of solutions that are just oriented towards the historical retrospective reporting. Find something that helps you fail fast and grows.
I think you're right. I think that, thinking about it from a practical point of view, with any of these solutions, the first job of whoever the stakeholders of the company that is bringing one or multiple solutions, to the team, is going to be data wrangling, pulling together the data that's needed. And getting back to Winston's point of failing fast, I think you're going to want something that you can get data ingested quickly, you can get some results out quickly, and it can grow with you. It can let you add channels and continue to grow as more data either becomes available or you do move into other channels. I mean, if you're a startup and you're just in digital and social, but 6 months from now, you're starting to invest in TV, you want something that will allow you to pull that in and continue to provide some, consistency in your measurement across that, and let you get quick reads on these things. I mean, Winston was speaking, gosh, I think in the first part of this conversation about this idea of testing investments. You need rapid feedback to do that too. And it may be a totally new data source that you've never touched before. Like I mentioned, TikTok is one that didn't even exist, I don't know, 3 years ago. I don't remember when it came out. And then all of a sudden everybody's putting money into it. So there's no way to have a measurement on it yet, but you want to be able to turn that around quickly and understand it. And I think at the end of the day, it is, the company needs to ask themselves what they really want out of this. And so there are plenty of companies that really all they want and all they need is that quarterly retrospective. And they're okay having a full-time employee that's entire job is wrangling together all of these data sources to hand off to someone who's going to build them this MMM shop, several months after each quarter's end to let them know how they did, half a year ago for whatever reason. That is a real use case, and there are people that need that. There are other people that need something that's on much faster because they're trying to make tactical decisions, on a much shorter than a monthly cadence, on a weekly, bi-weekly cadence, for example.
And if you are the type of profile that that's looking to grow fast and needs something yesterday, don't get caught up in believing that you've got to have every marketing data stone unturned before you turn on your solution, before you try to start implementing. Get something, even if it's limited at first, get something going so that you can learn how to use it and how to be and to let it influence your data-driven decision making. Because the end of the day, you're only as good as the decisions that you're making. And if you're just sitting around waiting to make decisions, you're really going to be losing.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah.
Now I'm gonna just say that this is great stuff, guys. Like for the listeners, like, if you like what we're talking about, and we're just we want to hear from you guys too, because we want to know what questions you guys have, what comments you guys have, because we want to kind of build upon this. So like, subscribe, comment, give us some more information so we can kind of cater this to us and help us go in the right direction. Because I think at the end of the day, we want to provide value for the listeners, for the folks that are in those positions where they have to make some marketing decisions or aspire to make some marketing decisions. You know, we talked a lot about kind of the bigger marketer, but, you know, if you guys tell us about your situation, you know, if you're in a smaller company, or maybe you're just starting out, you're a mom and pop shop, you own a laundromat, and you want to like get into, want to expand your base or something, you know, please let us know. We would, you know, happy to go in that direction too. So with that, you know, I think we can continue going on, but before we do, I think I want to start wrapping up. Like, any last comments? I want to have one last question, but any last, you know, given what we have talked about, guys, like anything that you guys want to, you know, tie a ribbon on and just like close off before I go into this last point?
I feel like I'm supposed to have an answer. I don't, but Winston does. I can see him about to say something.
Thank you.
I don't be realistic about the limitations in marketing data. Recognize that you don't need to boil the ocean, and that the data is not even going to let you get close to doing that, and that you don't need all of the data to paint a representative picture. Ultimately, that's all you need to be able to do is to get representativeness.
But this was kind of where I was going to go with, since we might have taken it already. But I was going to ask both of you guys, like, what's the easiest thing that you think that a marketer or someone in that position can do or think of, just to kind of move the needle? You know, not something that they have to like go on and evaluate a bunch of vendors and go through that whole process, but something easy that they can kind of take away from today and, you know, consider.
I would say run an experiment somewhere. I would say, like, you don't, I mean, you can see outcomes without having a measurement tool in place. Like, you can see web clicks, you know, you have access to that in Google Analytics or sales. And I would say, if you suspect a channel may be underperforming, pull back on it in a market and see what happens. Just, you know, you may, at worst case scenarios, you do miss out on some sales, but you learn that you were wrong about that hypothesis and you put your money back in, and then maybe you increase it. And either way, you've taken away a valuable learning, I think.
Yeah, I think if your firm doesn't already have a culture of experimentation, then it's like the best thing you can do is to be a bit of a contrarian within the firm and start pushing experimentation yourself.
Right.
You got to do that before you can do what I said, apparently, actually, I think.
So we got you guys together.
Yes, you got to change the culture, then run an experiment. So, yeah.
Well, I think you know, just start running the experiments, maybe get permission, and then people recognize the value, and then the culture will change.
And these experiments, I mean, really, there may be cases where you can get forgiveness instead of permission, because these experiments don't necessarily have to be very costly. Like, they are the kind of things that rounding errors can make for great experiments here and there. So, so, I mean, depending on who you are and where you are, I mean, you can pick one market and just, you know, accidentally turn off social in that market and see what happens. That might be more than a rounding error, depending on the market. But
I like how Steven's like pushing for mistakes.
well, it gets, I mean, it's that, I don't know, it's fail fast. You're also going to find out really quick what kind of manager you have if you ask forgiveness instead of permission on a very tiny mistake that led to some great understanding, right?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
If you're a growth-oriented person, be realistic about the firm that you're in, and, you know, corporate ladder growth is not the same as like personal career performance growth.
This is true.
You know, maybe one day we could start taking the perspective of say your company is not growth. But yeah, maybe give us a comment and we can pursue that further. So I thank you guys for your time, Winston, Steven. If you guys want more information,
Thanks, Winston. It's fun.
Thank you. Thank you. If you want more information and, you know, kind of find, you know, Winston and Steven and kind of contact them, a good place to go is marketingevolution.com, and we'd be happy to help and, you know, address them address more bigger questions there. But if not, leave a comment. And again, we'll try to cater this and grow this. And again, demystify marketing and give you guys value.
Are we going to talk about cars next time?
I hope so. Cars and guitars.
Cars and guitars, cigars and
Probably various.
quasars.
Oh wait, that didn't rhyme. Damn it. I mean, darn it. Can I cuss on this thing?
I think so.
That's the internet.
Okay.
Or superheroes. Do that too.
Yeah, it was spelled damn DAM. I was talking about an actual physical object that holds back water, not eternal damnation. Damn, I did it again.
All right. We'll see you all next time.
Bye.